For this project, excavating machines would dig a 3-foot wide trench down to bedrock. As dirt and rock were removed, they would be replaced by the slurry.
Slurry?
The slurry is a mixture of water and bentonite, a type of expansive gray clay that has a swelling tendency and would plug any holes along the side as excavators dug deeper. Then, the workers lowered into each slurry-filled segment a pre-assembled 7-story high steel cage of reinforcing rods, weighing 65 tons.
7-story high.
The cage provided a framework for the concrete wall that was to come. The concrete would be poured in at the top of the trench through a pipe that resembled an elephant's trunk.
The concrete was heavier than the clay, so it sank to the bottom. And
what was the reason for that detail?
Now it was reclaimed and used for the next section of trenching.
All in all, construction workers had to make 152 of those 22-foot trench segments to enclose an area 2 blocks wide and 4 blocks long.
A unique method and used extensively now. In fact, a number of people from other cities come to look at how the Trade Center was built.
See, they keep talking about this method as though the geology of the area was a massive hurdle that came up suddenly, but surely they must have considered that before they picked the site. I don't really understand what they're trying to say here, because they're trying to sort of pass it off as though it was this big, sudden problem that they had to tackle. Or was this all figured out before anything started? Because they're making it sound like they got there on day one, started digging and thought, oh God, how are we going to do this?
The site posed another major challenge. The tunnels containing the path commuter rail lines lay underground within the excavation area. Over 130,000 passengers traveled daily on these lines.
They had to dig around these extremely ancient cast iron tunnels for the Hudson Tubes, what is now the path. And these were really, really old, fragile, literally tubes in which these trains ran. And to do the foundation work required almost microsurgery.
So did they go under the Hudson?
Excavate all around these and support them while they were doing all the foundation work and then raising the building over it.
The fragile tubes were supported in protective cradles 40 feet in diameter while excavation continued around them.
Because they're calling those tubes ancient. And from what I'm getting here is those tubes go all the way under the Hudson River. And they were cast iron. I mean, if that's true, that's more impressive than the towers. We need a documentary on that.
To remove the 1 million cubic yards or 100,000 truckloads worth of landfill, the solution by Austin Tobin seemed to be a win-win situation.
Instead of carting this dirt all the way to New Jersey or
hauling it
way out to sea, simply place it on the west side of West Street. But not just to dump it in the river, but to carefully contain it within a series of coffer dams, such as, in effect, you would be increasing the size of New York City and thus create 23 acres of new land.
As a result of the excavated material, the landfill created some of the most valuable real estate in the country.
You couldn't build a building on there.
New York got $90 million worth of land that would eventually become Battery Park and the World Financial Center. Although the foundations were in place, there was still the problem of bringing thousands of tons of steel up over 100 floors. In past construction of skyscrapers, derricks were used. But a derrick had to be constantly lifted to a higher position.
I like these old construction videos. There are actually several of them on the Twin Towers. A lot of footage, very similar to this. It's another very boring video, I'm not gonna lie. It's not really something you can make a reaction video on, but I might watch it at some point.
The answer was a self-powered crane that came from across the globe.
These were the so-called kangaroo cranes, nicknamed because they're coming from Australia, and they were put at the corner of each building. And what these kangaroo cranes essentially were able to do was to hoist themselves up with automatic machinery built into the crane such that the crane could rise as the building went up.
The crane's diesel motors supplied the power, driving a series of hydraulic lifts installed at the base of each corner.
And an interesting problem at the very end is how do you get the kangaroo crane down? And the way that was done is they had to be disassembled and brought down by elevator.
The cranes
elevator
would raise a structure unlike any in the world.
Oh my god.
Before the buildings would be finished, more radical construction and engineering methods would forever change how skyscrapers were built.
No thanks, you're right.
Construction of the Twin Towers began in August 1968.
Yamasaki
Said
wanted
fuck all
something
that.
different.
What he decided on was a revolutionary way of constructing high-rises, the exterior skeleton system.
What Yamasaki came up with, in conjunction with structural engineers, is to make the skin of the building much stronger so that you wouldn't need internal columns.
Ever since the 19th century, skyscrapers have been built with a network of interior supporting columns.
Just
Their
been over this.
exterior walls were merely curtain walls that admitted light and kept out the rain. But in the World Trade Center, its tough exterior walls would carry the vertical loads and have the strength to resist the enormous force of lateral winds as well. High-strength steel that had not been available before made this possible.
A good analogy, I think, to explain it is the World Trade Center towers are like stalks of celery. The rigidity comes from the outside, not from the inside. And this also accounts for their unique appearance.
I'm not a vegetable guy, as you can tell. I have to actually Google image this. Rigidity comes from the outside. Yeah, okay. I see that. I can see that. I can see that. Continue.
The building was designed to have a fully loaded 707 crash into it. That was the largest plane at the time. I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because...
I forgot this part was in here. Oh my goodness. How unfortunate, eh? And how coincidental as well that he is talking about the exact thing that happened. Oh dear me. That shocked me a bit. That took me off guard. Let's go back a little bit. I think he said it could withstand 2. No, it couldn't.
Plane at the time. I believe that the building probably could sustain multiple impacts of jetliners because this structure is like the mosquito netting on your screen door, this intense grid. And the jet plane is just a pencil puncturing that screen netting. It really does nothing to the screen netting.
To achieve this kind of strength, engineers conducted 2 comprehensive tests. The first was a boundary layer wind tunnel test.
It's the heat
Scale
as well, though,
models
isn't it?
of the
Obviously,
World
the
Trade
fuel
Center,
burning.
along with a large section
He's
of the
not
city,
taking into
were put
account.
into a wind tunnel. Planners spent hours doing mathematical stress calculations of various wind effects on the building.
With the World Trade Center was the first time that for a high-rise building that
Damn that comb over.
comprehensive boundary layer wind tunnel studies had been performed.
The second was a human sensitivity test.
They created a very interesting experiment.
Good unit.
The bait
If you
for
had a
this
mask
particular
on.
experiment is they were offering free eye examinations. And unbeknownst to the people, while they were getting their eye exam, it was a legitimate deal. They did get the eye exam. But what they didn't know was that the room in which the eye examination was taking place was being subjected to variable forces of sway. And what they were trying to determine is how much sway would the average person tolerate before he or she started to object.
Amazingly, people tolerated sway equivalent to that caused by 150-mile-per-hour winds. The exterior skeleton system also allowed for a maximum of open, usable, and rentable column-free floor space. This helped create another engineering first. 2 buildings, each 110 stories high, could have produced a maze of elevators. Tobin and Yamasaki avoided that problem by borrowing a key concept from New York's famed subway system. They proposed dividing each tower building into 3 parts or zones. Each zone would have its own lobby, and people would be able to transfer from express to local in the 2nd and 3rd zones. Initially, the idea was almost shot down.
How does that work then? So this is the express. And I'm assuming this is an express. What's going on here? These are the local. So this one only goes so far, this one goes even less? Or do these all go from here to here? And then it's just like, it's just illustrating them. I'm a little confused. Yeah, well.
Austin Tobin, who was the executive director of the Port Authority, had a blue ribbon panel of architectural experts. And the blue ribbon panel,
I have 2 degrees in engineering.
That the
you wouldn't believe it.
tenants would never accept such an arrangement.
Modern
that it had
education.
never been done before, and that people would not tolerate the waste of time of taking 2 separate elevators to reach their destination. As it turns out, people readily accepted it because the truth was that this system, even though it involved 2 rides, the express ride and the local ride, actually saved time and resulted in a shorter wait.
One of the things that, you know, again, the Port Authority was way out ahead of everybody else in really marshaling the best, not just structural engineering minds, but also the best electrical and electronic engineering minds.
Those
All
70s and
these
80s
pioneering
models that they
ideas
built
created a
architects,
complex
so
that
cool.
was structurally sound and incredibly efficient.
Did they still do that?
Its strength and its very existence would be most severely tested not by high winds or a jet airplane, but by an unforeseen and appalling act. On February 26, 1993, a horrific act of international terrorism struck the United States. In an attempt to bring down the Twin Towers, Islamic terrorists called the Fifth Liberation Army planted a bomb equivalent to 2,200 pounds of TNT in the parking garage of the second-floor
I
basement
don't know
of Tower
anything
1
about this
at the
attack, to be
World
honest
Trade
with you.
Center.
I've never
At
read it.
12:18 p.m., a huge explosion left 6 people dead and more than 1,000 injured.
I took the elevators down to the B2 level, was walking down the hallway that day, and I just entered the door to my office, and the bomb went off. All I remember is a tremendous loud sound and a blast of wind going behind me, and the secretary that was walking with me that day, and she was heading down the hall to the carpenter's office. Both of her legs were broken.
The massive explosion ripped through the basement floor, creating a hole 100 feet wide, 4 stories deep, a tomb of crumpled cars, concrete, and twisted steel. However, the apocalyptic devastation hoped for by the terrorists did not come to pass. Fortunately, the World Trade Center had been constructed to withstand hurricane winds of up to 150 miles per hour. The energy impact from those winds far exceeds the impact from the bombing.
An analogy that one might put to that is if you take a firecracker and you put the firecracker on the ground and you put a can over it. Anyone who's done that realizes that the can goes shooting up in the air and the ground doesn't move. Well, the
Just cut it
building
off,
was
man.
analogous
Let it
to the
go.
ground. It didn't really move.
What concerned engineers most was the bathtub-like 7-story basement of the Trade Center complex that keeps out the waters of New York Harbor.
Yeah, I was looking through X a few days ago, and somebody posted a conspiracy theory on the Twin Towers. There's a lot of them. I try and tend to ignore them. But they posted an aerial shot of the towers after they'd collapsed, and they circled it, and they captioned it with, "Where is the rubble?" as if to say, if this was real, why isn't there a giant rubble pile on the ground where the towers used to be? And I think what either they don't realize or they want to forget is that this was under the towers, 70 feet, 7 floors of essentially empty space, car parks, tunnels, things like that. That this is where all that rubble fell into. That's why there isn't a giant pile. Even though there was quite a big pile, it's not as big as it would have been. I think sometimes people just need to do a little bit more reading, but the less said on that, the better.
The loss of the basement floors meant that the support of the bathtub walls was in question. The entire wind load is carried to these columns. Within 36 hours, the damaged structural column and remaining columns were given solid additional bracing. Cleaning the extensive debris was another priority.
It was a massive, almost like a Normandy or D-Day. The cleanup operation was on a heroic scale. The engineering reconstruction was on a heroic scale.
They have no idea. No idea what's
Working
coming.
round the clock, An army of engineers, maintenance people, and construction workers removed over 6,000 tons of debris. Final cleanup and repair costs reached more than $500 million.
$500 million in '93.
Was New York Governor Mario Cuomo.
That's well over $1 billion now.
Don't worry about it.
And increased security for truck deliveries and pickups were implemented. Tenants and visitors conducting business at the World Trade Center now wear electronic identification badges, and access to the basement parking lots is restricted to tenants only.
Why was that not a thing anyway?
But it shows the tremendous resiliency and strength of these two towers, that such a significant event resulted in what was amazingly not that much property damage, and what could have been a real tragedy, only 6 people were killed here, rather than the tens of thousands.
Okay, firstly, a real tragedy is 6 people dying, and secondly, how is it not property damage? $500 million. That seems quite severe to me.
That the terrorists wanted to kill.
It was a symbolic act more than a murderous act.
No, it was a murderous act.
Is a symbol, an icon, a representation, not just of the Port of New York and New Jersey, or of Lower Manhattan, or of Wall Street, but indeed of the capitalist system.
Oh my God, what was that? I thought that was footage from 9/11 for a second. What was that? Was that a plane?
Not just of the Port of New York and New Jersey, or of Lower Manhattan, or of Wall Street, but indeed of the capitalist system, and by extension, all of America.
The foreshadowing in this documentary is
the World
just
Trade Center could be
awful.
seen as a symbol of New York's strength and resilience.
Great engineering projects like this become another way of our continuing to tell a story about who and what we are. You know, that's one of the ways that civilization reproduces itself. And sometimes we have to write these things out real big and then look at all the small stuff that goes into them, floor by floor by floor.
Well, there you go. Now we know how it all worked. You know, I do give the towers a lot of kind of stick in these videos about how they weren't stable and or how wrong they were about surviving an impact from a plane. But to be fair, the way they were designed, the outer skeleton and everything, I'm pretty sure that's the whole reason that they stood as long as they did from the impact of those planes. Those planes, like I said in the last video, you're looking at, I think it's £250,000 of airplane traveling at 500-600 miles an hour full of jet fuel, slamming straight into the side of the building, and they still stood there for, I think it was close to an hour, maybe even over an hour, to let people escape, get out. So that's a testament to them there. But anyway, I hope you learned a little bit of something. I think I did. I learned a few things, so that's always interesting. Like I said, there is a video. It's not a documentary, but there is a video on YouTube of footage of the construction of the towers. But it's a video going back to the 70s, so it's very grainy. Again, it's not something that you can kind of react to. There's not a lot for me to jump at or smile at or laugh at or do a normal sort of reaction in that sense. But I might just do a watch along to it if anyone wants to watch it with me. I find it interesting, so there you go. I'm probably going to do that at some point in the near future. But anyway, as always, thanks guys for coming by and watching this with me, and I will see you next time.